Hello and welcome to September's ICA LinkedIn Live. Today we're going to focus on how we can use artificial intelligence in the context of organization culture. More about that in a moment. But before we start, can I mention that we've now been running these ICA LinkedIn Live events for about 6 months. We've found that they've been successful, they've been valued, useful, and generated a lot of interest. And so we're going to continue running these. In fact, from next month, we're going to be running 2 each month on the second Wednesday of the month and on the final Wednesday of the month. And this will be at 1:30 UK time, obviously at different times, depending on where you are across the world. That's the live timings, and these will be recorded and available to all ICA members through our Learning Hub. So you can join us live wherever you are, regardless of your status in the context of ICA. But if you're an ICA member, you can watch the recording of this through our hub. That's not the only change, though. We're also going to be renaming these in conversation. So you'll know, ICA members will know that one of our products is in compliance, and this is going to complement that and will be called in conversation. And of course, that reflects the nature of these events that are conversations with senior thought leaders on the subject of compliance. Something else that we're going to change is we're going to continue to run for 20 minutes, but we'll be adding 10 minutes to the 20. And during those additional 10 minutes, we're going to invite you to ask any questions that you may have. We've run it for just 20 minutes up until now, and we've found that there just isn't sufficient time to get to your questions. And that's a weakness. So can I invite you, if you have got any questions you'd like to raise, although I can't guarantee that we'll get to them all, we'll do our best. And we'll do that in about 20 minutes time and for the remaining 10 minutes. So I've set the scene. Today, I'm delighted to be joined once again by Georg Gößwein. I'm going to ask Georg in a moment to introduce himself. And we're going to be talking about the potential to use artificial intelligence in the context of culture. And we're going to be using, Georg, your PLLOB or PLLOB compliance model as a vehicle to do this. So, Georg, thank you so much for joining us again. Could I invite you to very briefly introduce yourself and perhaps to remind us a little bit about the PLLOB model? That's an acronym, of course, and we're interested to hear what it stands for. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tim, for inviting me again. And it's always a pleasure to be here with you in conversation. I like the title for this format. About myself, well, I'm an attorney by education. I have been in-house lawyer for about 20-25 years in large German corporations as general counsel, also sometimes combining it being a chief compliance officer. And after these 20-25 years, I left the situation of being employed, and now I'm self-employed. I'm a consultant. And when I went out of this organization type situation, I sort of took away one core learning, and that was that it's very difficult to make compliance a part of an organization's culture simply by putting policies in the organization, processes, rules, and also training. There needs to be more. That's my conviction. It needs to become part of the DNA of an organization. You need more. And that's when I came up with PLLOB. PLLOB is an acronym, as you said. It stands for the concepts press, for press, public press, newspaper, leadership, L, the first L, legal, the second L, O for others, and belly for gut instinct. And each of the concepts stands for a question. Press stands for, does this promote our reputation? Leadership stands for, does this represent our values and make me a role model? Legal stands for, does this comply with our rules and the law? Other stands for, does my personal network accept this? And last but not least, belly stands for gut instinct. Does this give me a good gut feeling? And this concept, or this formula, as I call it, is used in business to evaluate business situations, to detect dilemma situations, and then simply making the right decision. And when you're running through these questions, once you have a dilemma situation, you will see, yes, at the end, you'll have the right decision. Either it be talking to another person or actually making your decision and having a good gut feeling about it.
We were talking just before we went live, of course, Georg, about the danger for particularly large organizations to develop more and more extensive, complicated, long-winded rules of conduct to govern behavior and decision-making. That is arguably counterintuitive. It doesn't always work and very often can crush innovation and lead to too rigid an approach. Of course, what you've been able to do is develop something that offers an organization a more mature, informed, and staff-led approach, where individual members of staff are entrusted, enabled to make the right decisions, because they've got this kind of a formula to inform that. And just before we move on, I know that you've used this to transform the culture of a number of different organizations. And I know we were talking before about one very large organization in Thailand, where you were able to successfully use this in order to implement change.
Yes, that was very interesting. And it was, of course, also very pleasing to see how people could use that very, well, in a way, simple tool to come up with the right decision. Also, it was a good tool for management to transport their conviction that compliance should be part of business. As you can also speak it out, you can say, I PLLOB a decision, if you like it. You can also say, I apply the PLLOB test, if you like that better. But thereby, management can sort of transport their conviction. Yes, we believe compliance is relevant, is crucial even for our business. And we want you as staff to apply it on a daily basis. And when you come up with a problem, you couldn't PLLOB a decision, you don't come up with a right decision, you say, I need support, then talk to us. We don't want to have it hidden somewhere underneath the carpet. We want to have it talked about and then make a good decision and also feel good about being accountable for it, what we just decided. And yes, that's how we sort of experienced it in a live situation. Also measuring the success by doing surveys while we were implementing PLLOB. We're starting with the first survey where we look, how mature is actually the organization. It's a very important point that you made, that you need some level of matureness to implement PLLOB, or also how to basically adjust the implementation. If the organization is more mature, you do it a different way than if organization is less mature. And then you implement it. And in the next step, you then have a second survey where you measure the first effect of PLLOB in the organization. Do people actually apply the tool? Do they understand it? Does it support them in daily business, or does it create problems? Why? So that was very interesting to see. And then last but not least, after always depending on the size of the organization, we have a third survey, and there we can then actually measure, was it an overall success? Did we succeed in changing culture? And is PLLOB really helping everybody to, bottom line, make the right decision? And does it increase visibility of integrity, of the relevance of integrity and compliance in an organization?
So yeah, that's a lovely segue to think about artificial intelligence. where you were talking, of course, about the importance of being able to measure. And that's quite challenging.
Yes.
The culture of an organization isn't straightforward to put metrics around, to put some kind of objective measures around this. And one approach might be to use artificial intelligence as a tool. Now, I know we were speaking before this event that we are exploring the options here. We're not rushing to conclusions around building an immediate, all-encompassing solution for culture. What we're doing is testing an idea. And I know that's something that you've done. And my understanding, of course, is that you've tested the use of artificial intelligence, specifically using PLLOB as a model, and focusing on the Volkswagen scandal that
Yes.
you saw rolling out over the last few years. So for those that may not be familiar with the Volkswagen scandal, or it's been called Dieselgate, can you just very briefly summarize what that is? And then I'll be interested to hear from you what you found when you used artificial intelligence as a way to use PLLOB as a model, testing what happened in Volkswagen.
Absolutely. Well, in very simple terms, Volkswagen was faced with a challenge that they were, at least that's what they thought at the time, were not able to meet certain legal requirements with regard to the diesel emissions of cars. And unfortunately, they decided to walk on a route to, become creative, and they programmed a software which would detect that the car was on a test stand, and then the car would change the program of basically how it ignites diesel in a way that the emissions test would be passed. So that was, in simple terms, it was cheating. And what I actually did, I wrote a prompt in ChatGPT. I think it was 3.5 at that time. I described, I basically told ChatGPT, okay, now you're being a compliance officer, and I would ask you to use the following questions to measure whether the following behavior is compliant or not. And that I put in the prompt area, and then I pressed enter, and it took maybe 30 seconds, and the software threw out its answers, and they were quite impressive. Now, everybody, and rightfully so, will say, well, Dieselgate is a very famous case, so large language models have a lot of language to work with. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's really, it's clearly to say that, this is a special case. It's very public. There's a lot of material about it, also regarding values, because as I just told you, one of the questions is, does this represent our values and make me a role model? And in this case, I told the software, okay, please apply the following values: fairness, transparency, and values like that. And from my point of view, and I wrote a LinkedIn post about this whole sort of endeavor. The software, the AI, did a very good job. So now the next reflex could be, wow, we'll just apply it in an everyday environment and use it. And I discussed it with lots of colleagues, and I found very different opinions on that idea to really use it in practice. I know companies do that. They use chatbots in a compliance environment. And I just yesterday, actually, I was participating in a discussion about that. And they said, well, we're not happy yet, because the software simply does mistakes. It refers to the wrong policy and so on. And then I mentioned, and that's maybe the core issue about this whole complex, really, applying AI in such an environment. So what do you think about applying AI to evaluating values? Is that something that should be kept for us humans? Or can we, also give it in the hands of AI to measure certain behavior, certain attitude against values that an organization might have given to itself. And there are, the opinions go like that. People say, no, impossible. And people with an IT background say, wait a minute, if we program this software right, we really work on the biases, make very clear, or make sure that no bias is included in the software. If we work on the hallucinations, and if we achieve what we want to achieve, the software might have less bias than a human when then evaluating values. So I think we're on a very interesting sort of path, and the law that has been put in place now on a European level, I think it's a good idea that we are helping basically the innovative world to also see some boundaries. And on the other hand, I see the problematic that this law might also slow down innovation. I think it's just we're at a very difficult path here, and I'm hoping and I'm seeing that most people are doing their best, and also with applying now AI in a corporate environment using the PLLOB questions, I would just do it, and everybody can, just try to implement it in your environment and check how it works. Feed the software with your policies, with your processes, and see whether it refers to the right policies once it's looking for answers. And maybe it will help you to clean up the mess that you might have, looking honestly on your regulatory world environment framework in your company. Maybe it will find out that there are certain conflicts of rules, or some rules are very old and no longer applicable, stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of potential in this whole complex. We have to be aware of potential risks, absolutely. But still, I think it shouldn't prevent us from trying to use it, and then, of course, on the way, on the fly, improving it. And for a longer time, still, always, of course, you will have a disclaimer telling each and everybody, okay, you're getting advice here, but it's software that's giving advice. Please check, make a human check. And I think that's very crucial. Yeah.
So we've got one or two questions that are coming through, and I just remind colleagues around the world that we're very keen to hear your views.
Absolutely.
And I think you've touched on an important part of this. We're starting to see artificial intelligence increasingly used across industry, and not surprisingly, in compliance. But the question, of course, is, well, where are the boundaries? And you touched on that. The EU has introduced legislation around this, but that doesn't altogether define where those boundaries are. It helps us, it provides a framework around this. But there is a need for us, I think, to have a public conversation,
absolutely,
amongst other things, around how we can best use artificial intelligence and harness the power without becoming a servant to it. And I'm struggling to find the best way of putting this. I was really interested to hear what you said about the potential for AI to be less biased than human beings, to be more accurate. That's quite a challenging concept. Can I just go back to that for a moment? What have you got in mind when you say that?
I'm basically quoting a friend of mine who is an IT specialist. And he just said, there are ways of training the software. And of course, it's easy to manipulate AI in a way that it would embrace bias intentionally. And that's, many people say that's the huge risk that people will manipulate like Dieselgate. They manipulate on that AI. And I guess maybe transparency will help again. Just if the code is open, and of course very difficult. How was it trained? In which environment was the software trained? where it might sort of get
Yes.
its bias from.
And I think there's something more than that, which is about AI can incorporate vast amounts of data, vast amounts of learning, far more than a human being
Absolutely.
could do. And so if it is, as you say, well-trained, if it is given good data to ingest, to understand, to see what the patterns of good behavior are, and to contrast that with patterns that lead to deviant behavior, you can see why that would potentially be more accurate than a human being. In the same way as a doctor is a finite resource, they can only hold so much information in their head. Even with their instincts, there are limitations around what they can do. But using artificial intelligence that can look at diagnosis and patient outcomes across millions of individuals, you can see how that would generate better outcomes. So there's a sort of analogy there. We've come to our 20-minute mark, incredibly, Georg, but I'd like to bring some of the questions to you that have been raised in the comments section. And
Please.
just for those that haven't raised any questions, you might like to voice your views around some of these quite controversial things that we've been talking about. So Venkatesh, thank you for your comment. You've said that you're curious to understand to what extent we can trust the results thrown by AI, because now most of the AI carry a disclaimer that their AI engine is still in the development stage and asks us to verify the information. Well, this goes to, of course, what you were just talking about, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. And yes, we cannot. Very simple. I think what it could do is it could help in a process of making a decision, sort of a sparring partner. And yes, it will at least at the moment, and I'm quite sure for some time, and maybe forever. I don't know. Maybe that's the decision that humankind takes. That in a certain environment, AI shall not, and I think we have already done that, shall not take a decision. You know, what do we do in a justice environment where courts take decisions? You know, can we have AI there as an agent? And we already know that has been done, and it was quite a disaster. I think that, you know, their bias was very strong, and it led to huge problems. So no, I agree with the person from
Venkatesh, yes.
Venkatesh. Thank you, Venkatesh. Relying on it now, it's definitely too early, and maybe we will never in certain areas fully rely on AI.
Thank you. Dealer has asked, how do we use the bots? So you mentioned the use of bots, and of course, well, my understanding here is this is where we're using chat or other functions to automate a response to human beings.
Yeah.
So would you like to elaborate on what you were saying before about how we could use them?
Not wanting to advertise for ChatGPT or any other programmer, but the ones that I know, they actually work like a bot. The core task or challenge really is writing the prompt, describing what you want from it. And of course, then in a corporate environment, if you want to include your policies, your processes, rules, you would have to sort of create an environment with your IT department where the software or the AI then can have access to your policies. When you're asking, you know, I don't know, I want to give a certain gift in a certain environment in a certain country to a person. Is that compatible, or is it compliant with our policies, rules, and processes? Of course, then the chatbot would have to have access to your policies. And that's something you can do. It's something that can be programmed. When I did the Dieselgate case, I simply told ChatGPT, assume the rules, policies, and processes framework of a large German corporation. Okay, so of course I don't have access to the policies of VW, but that seemed to be enough. Of course, it was enough because we know what's written in these policies. And of course, you cannot cheat and writing a software that cheats on the test stand. That was very clear. But of course, you would need much more. Well, it would be necessary to really apply it in a corporate environment to really have access to these rules. And that, I think, could be actually, there could be a great benefit for you if you, once you do that. I can imagine that AI would point out, and of course you could also tell AI to do that, to certain conflicts in these rules, or maybe also wording that seems not to be precise, not easy to understand, wording that has certain barriers to understand, whatever. So, and that's really what it's about, I think, hopefully reducing the numbers of policies, of rules and processes in an organization, and then ending up with less, better to be understood rules and policies, which people stick up to. And PLLOB will help you to sort of transport this idea because it is short. It already sends out the message, less can be more.
Can I pick up
yes,
on that then?
Please.
Because George, I'm just looking for George's surname. Georg Gößwein, thank you very much for your question, where you're asking about the standards that AI uses to evaluate corporate maturity. And I think there's a number of different ways to answer this. And I know that, Georg, you and I aren't saying we have all the answers.
No.
What we're doing is we're raising an issue which we believe is relevant, it's immediate, it needs consideration. And what you've done is use the PLLOB model as one model, which you know works because you've applied it in the context of organization change. You're shaking your head.
No,
you are. Sorry. So you know that model works. And you've used that to ask the questions using artificial intelligence. But George, you make a good point. In order to use artificial intelligence, we need to be clear about what questions we are asking. And it may be that it's contained within PLLOB, or it may be that we can take a step back and ask the questions in terms of values. You know, so Barclays, for instance, Barclays Bank has defined its values as respect, integrity, service, excellence, and stewardship rises. That's, again, a series of questions that you could ask of a series of behaviors, or you could ask it of the policies and procedures. Or you could look more widely at the outcomes of an organization and how they've been derived using those questions. So, George, I think your question is a really important one. And that is, well, if we're going to use artificial intelligence, what standards are we measuring it against? And what metrics are we using in order to do that? Is that, I feel like I've started to answer the question myself, Georg, but have you got any thoughts there?
I do, and I absolutely agree with what you said. And it took me quite a while to design that formula. And I tried to embrace really all the crucial parts of a compliance management system or integrity management system, which I believe, have to be there. And that's why under leadership, the question is, does this represent our values and make me a role model? So I think I'm already embracing what George is suggesting. Of course, PLLOB wouldn't work in an environment where you don't have values. So, and also where maybe the concept of being a role model is considered to be irrelevant or not important. So what I say then, but being a consultant, maybe I have a different approach than other consultants. I will argue, of course, I will discuss, but I'm flexible on the questions. If some people say, and there are many other questions that you could ask, I think the ones that I came up with are very good, and they are intentionally closed questions. They have to be yes and no.
Yes.
And I think in in an IT or an AI environment that is crucial, 0-1. I wouldn't, want AI to go crazy on, philosophy about values. No, I want also AI to take a decision. Like I want the human in my formula to end up with a yes or no, because then you make a decision. And a company or an organization, I believe, will thrive once you're able to take good decisions in a rather short time. That
Yeah.
makes you superior to the competition. And that's why I designed the questions the way I designed them. And they also, that's sort of proven in an AI environment with public knowledge about the case, it worked very well. I will go for a test, and that will soon be the case. And stay posted, or look at my LinkedIn account, and maybe Tim, the two of us will continue the discussion with a new case that is then artificial in a way, a little bit more complex maybe, where you will have no public information about what
Yes.
the decision should look like. And then we will see what AI will do with that using the PLLOB questions. Maybe we will all experience a disaster. I don't know. We will see. Yeah.
So I'm mindful that we're coming up to time, or we are at time. I'm also mindful that there have been some really fantastic questions that have been raised around, for instance, the confidentiality of the information that we use, the danger of tainted information, driving bad decisions, and the challenges around recognizing fraudulent behavior or suspicious transactions. I'm afraid we don't have time to get to those, but my thanks to those individuals that have joined us and raised those questions. We're going to draw it to a close in a moment, but can I briefly summarize, I think, where we've come in terms of this discussion? So we started recognizing that we need to challenge ourselves and our thinking about how we are using artificial intelligence. Yes, we need to be creative, innovative. We need to find ways to slim down our rule book, making it more meaningful and entrusting members of staff, empowering them to make good decisions without long and prescriptive rule books necessarily sitting behind us. But we recognize also that there are implicit challenges and dangers within this. And we wanted to just continue a wider conversation using Volkswagen as a means to do this, and your PLLOB model, which we know works because of the way in which you've been able to use it elsewhere. I think the sort of outcomes we're driving towards are, we can see value in this. I think you've highlighted, Georg, that this is something that you don't need specialist artificial intelligence software to do this. ChatGPT, and there are other platforms that will do this. If we're going to ingest corporate information, we might need to be careful about how we do that so that it's not made available to the wider public, if that's not something we want to allow. But this is within our reach. And so I think we are hoping that from this conversation, we can bring some light to the issues. We can challenge ourselves around what good practice looks like and suggest to colleagues around the world opportunities around how we can use AI locally. I've summarized as best I could. Have I missed anything within that, Georg?
No, I don't think so. And I would just stress this one point you made. Of course, people in this call shouldn't share their policy framework in the public domain. That wouldn't be a good idea. But I know that most, at least larger corporations, have their own AI models that they run. And then it's basically also about talking to your colleague in the IT department or wherever to maybe set something up that can help you in your daily business and your colleagues. And that's really the idea, to start experimenting, maybe being careful, of course, but experimenting and finding out potential solutions, new ways to do business, and thereby helping your business.
Georg, thank you. As always, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much for joining me. Colleagues around the world, thank you for joining us today, particularly for those that have shared their thoughts, their observations around this. I hope we'll have the opportunity to continue this conversation, this important challenge around how we take new technology and apply it into the area of compliance. But for the moment, do take care wherever you are in the world, and thank you again for joining us.